and I will be teaching on the integral approach to life. And we'll start with how it started. So, I was introduced to the one that kind of put this together with a lot of other people. His name is Ken Wilber, and welcome to the people online. He was guided by his own cognitive dissonance. He was guided by his intuition, and he inquired into what is the pattern when you put it all on the table. Integral is a set of orienting generalizations. The details specific will be and are being filled by the experts in the respective fields. The main ingredients of, well, let's go into, Ken Wilber says, I have one major rule. Everybody is right. More specifically, everybody, including me, has some important pieces of truth, and all of those pieces need to be honored, cherished, and included in a more gracious, spacious, and compassionate embrace. And he talks about waking up, growing up, opening up, cleaning up, and showing up. Integral theory is a mega theory, a theory of theories. It's an attempt to draw from as many fields of knowledge and sources of wisdom as possible. A matrix for diverse perspectives to see how they all fit in relationship to each other. A template for personal practice. He started out as an all-American kid. I think he was captain of teams and president in his high school, and everything was going his way. He gets into college, and he begins to study cognitive therapies, Gestalt therapy, psychology, and he also is introduced to Buddhism. And he's following both trains. He's meditating and he's going through therapy and seeing how it works. And he says both of them work. And he looks at the world, and there's like a lot of different stuff out there where people are saying different things, and they work for those people. And he gets confused. And he gets depressed because of his confusion, because he can't figure out how one group of people can say something and he follows it and it works, but on the opposite side, another group is saying a different thing, and yet as he follows that path, it works. How does this all come together? And so he begins reading, and I saw some stuff on the internet. He was a speed reader. He read for 10 hours a day, many days, for years. So one of the things that he found was during the last 30 years, we've witnessed a historical first. All of the world's cultures are now available to us. In the past, if you were born, say, Chinese, you would likely spend your entire life in one culture, often in one province, sometimes in the same house, living and loving and dying on a single plot of land. But today, people are geographically mobile. Knowledge itself is now global. This means also, for the first time, the sum total of human knowledge is available to us. The knowledge, experience, wisdom, and reflection of all major human civilizations, pre-modern, modern, postmodern, are all open for anyone to study. If we took literally everything that all the various cultures have to tell us about human potential, about spiritual growth, psychological growth, social growth, and put it all on the table, what if we attempted to find the critically essential keys to human growth, based on the sum total of human knowledge open to us. What if we attempted, based on cross-cultural study, to use all of the world's great traditions to create a composite map, a comprehensive map, an all-inclusive and integral map that included the best elements of all of them? If that sounds complicated, complex, and daunting, the results turn out to be surprisingly simple and elegant. Over the last several decades, there has indeed been an extensive search for a comprehensive map of human potentials. This map uses all the known systems and models of human growth, from the ancient shamans and sages to today's breakthrough in cognitive science, and distills their major components into 5 simple factors that are the essential elements or keys to unlocking and facilitating human evolution. And so what Wilbur has done, and he's basically my age, he digested all of this material, and he found patterns that were consistent throughout all the different cultures. And so he began to develop systems, and he took a word, I don't have the author right now, but he coined a word called holons. And in his book, A Brief History of Everything, he talks about holons as the key element of everything in the universe. And a holon is a whole, but it becomes a part. And that becomes a whole, and it becomes a part of another. So everything is a whole unto itself, as well as a part of some larger whole. So holons exhibit a quality of self-emergence. Evolution happens through differentiation, integration, differentiation, integration, differentiation, integration. As evolution happens, you begin to see a process of transcend and include. So one of the examples of this is atoms, molecules, and cells. So as atoms join together, they become molecules, and as molecules join together, they become cells. So you're always going to have more of your base of your atoms than you do molecules, and you're going to have more molecules than you do cells. But each one, your molecule includes all the properties of the atom. But something else happens. It becomes more than one and one. It becomes a new property. And so the same thing with molecules to cells. Every cell includes molecules, and it includes all of the properties that were in those molecules. And so you come into cells. And so as he goes back to and explains in the Brief History of Everything, he explains the Big Bang when holons began to move from smaller to combine and to combine and to combine. And so holons are all the way up and all the way down, and they're the base of everything that happens. And I should have written down the name of the guy that developed that coined the word holon, but Wilbur took it and ran with it. So, and he's written, this is just about a quarter of the books that he's written. He's actually written at least 20 books, and continues to study and grow. handout there. So human development he breaks it into 5 stages, and there are different people that break it into more stages, but he simplifies it with the 5 stages. And the 5 stages of human development are quadrants, levels, lines, states, and types. So if you can see that online, those are what he coins as the 5 stages of human development. So, and all 5 stages are available in your own awareness right now. They're aspects of your own experience, contours of your own consciousness. And so the reason that he created a map is maps help you make sure that you're utilizing the full range of resources for the situation, and it teaches you how to learn to spot them. So you appreciate, exercise, use, and accelerate your own growth and develop into higher, wider, and deeper ways of being. You orient yourself more easily and fully to the exciting journey of discovery and awakening. A map is not the territory, but a map is the best thing that we have at the time, and it's a guide to the operating system of your own reality. So if you were flying over a region, it would help to have a map so that you would not run into something. And so that's the same thing with human development. We have a map. He has developed a map that will help us to see and understand human development. So we are going to start with states. There are some handouts there. If that's a real basic one, so that you can take notes on that page if you want to take notes. We're going to start with states. Actually, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. We're going to start with states of consciousness, and the basic states of consciousness are waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. But there are many states. There are meditative states that include yoga, contemplation, and meditation. There are altered states that are drug-induced. And there are states created by peak experiences, triggered or intense, making love, walking in nature, listening to music. A state is just, it's a temporary feeling. The wisdom traditions say there are 3 natural states in the spectrum of spiritual enlightenment. They may not be important, they may be important, but it's a good thing to see them and to touch base with subject realities. No matter how important they are temporary. They come and they go. Now, once a child, this is kind of an example, once a child develops through linguistic development, the child has permanent access to language. So you start out with, you may see the word dog, and the child goes, oh, that's what that is. Well, tomorrow, they may not remember that, because that was a state. It was not a stage yet. But once they begin to see it and it comes to them, oh yeah, that's a dog. Once they know it's a dog, that becomes a stage and they know it. And so in language, as you study, you begin to have permanent access. So it changes from a state to a stage. And then at a stage, you have access to the qualities of that stage, such as greater consciousness, more embracing love, higher ethical callings, greater intelligence, and awareness. And you have it virtually anytime you want it. It's yours. And so, how many stages are there? It depends on how you want to divide it up. You can take the Fahrenheit scale or the centigrade scale. It depends on how you want to divide it. So, there are many ways to slice and dice the pie. Depends on what you want to keep track of. Jean Gerber, an anthropologist, uses 5 stages of human development: the archaic, the magic, the mystic, the rational, and the integral. Stages are also referred to as levels of development. The idea being that a stage represents a level of organization or a level of complexity. For example, from atoms to molecules to cells to organisms. Each of those stages involves a greater level of complexity. The word level is not meant, it's not rigid or exclusionary. It simply indicates the important emergent qualities that tend to come into being in a discrete or quantum-like fashion. And these developmental levels are aspects of natural phenomena. So when you combine, say, 2 molecules or two atoms, when you look at the periodic table, when you combine them, they become much more than the sum of those 2. So you have all the different, if you look at the periodic table, they're all atoms, but when you combine them in different ways, they become much greater than the sum total of those individual atoms. And this happens throughout all the different ways that holons join together. And if you remember, holon is the basic structure of everything. It's the whole that becomes part of another whole that becomes part of another whole. And this continues until we get to man. It continues through every part of evolution. Some of the levels would be an infant. You have the me stage. That's a pre-conventional egocentric stage. And as the child learns the culture and the rules and the norms for how he's growing up based on group morals and exclusive us convention, he goes into the next stage, which is conventional, which is ethnocentric. He begins to go from just thinking about him to thinking about his family, it might be church, might be school, his tribe. He begins to expand outward as his knowledge expands. And he starts with his rules, and then he begins to look at the rules of other people. And as he does that, he goes into the next stage, which is post-conventional. And it begins to include the care and compassion for all people. And the next stage would be integral, which is actually a cosmic awareness, which is actually a oneness with everything, beginning to realize that everything is one. Another way to picture this is mind, body, and spirit. The body is me, it's about survival, and it's egocentric. The mind is about us, and we begin to walk in the shoes of others. The spirit is about all of us. It's world-centric and it's diversity. And then the cosmic goes into the realm that transcends the physical realm. and it would be cosmic centric, and he spells that cosmic with a K to differentiate it from the way that normally cosmic is taken. By stages, we mean a progressive and permanent milestone along an evolutionary path of your own unfolding, whether stages of consciousness, energy, culture, spiritual realization, moral development, however many stages you want to divide it by. It is rungs of unfolding and it becomes higher, deeper, and wider potential. And there's these we're not going to go into. I'm going to be teaching another class in 3 weeks, so we may go into more of this. But these are the stages of human development. They're put together by anthropologists that show the different stages of human development, and we'll go into more of that probably in the next class. So we're going to start with that you guys have, which is the lines of development. On your page, no. Okay, so we've talked about states and we've talked about stages. So those are the first two, and I know on that page they're not in order, but they're all so interrelated that when you look at them, they all intertwine. So the next one that we're going to discuss I'm going to present is lines of development. In lines, have you ever noticed how unevenly developed virtually all of us are? Some people are highly developed in, say, logical thinking, but poorly developed in emotional feelings. Some people have highly advanced cognitive development. They're smart, but maybe they're poor in moral development. They're mean or ruthless. Some people excel in emotional intelligence, but they can't add 2 and 2. Howard Gardner made this concept fairly well known using the idea of multiple intelligences. Human beings have a variety of intelligences, such as cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence, musical intelligence, kinetic intelligence, artistic intelligence. Most people excel in 1 or 2, but they do poorly in others. This is not necessarily or even usually a bad thing. Part of integral wisdom is finding where one excels and where one can best offer the world your deepest gifts. And we are down to... We can think of these lines of development as multiple intelligences that have evolved in response to a core question. Okay. Oh, let me have one. I've got one. But... Okay. So we can think of these as multiple intelligence that have evolved in response to life's core questions. And I don't know if you can see this online, but there are core questions, and I'll just read through them. I want to give you a base this morning. These are yours to keep, so you can go back and look at them, maybe answer them. They're for your own use. We're not going to go into detail on them today, but I will read through them. What am I aware of? That determined by the cognitive line of development. What do I need? Who am I? What is important to me? How do I feel about this? What is the right thing to do? How should we interact? How should I physically do this? And what is of ultimate concern for me? So this is one of the ways that you can determine what your values are and where you your needs and values and intelligences and morals and your interpersonal relations and your spirituality. So these are just questions that trigger thoughts, and then we'll figure out how to fit them into the 4 quadrants as we go through and get to that. Although lines are intertwined and interrelated in many important ways, they all tend to evolve at different rates, helping us understand how some individuals can be very developed in some areas, but poorly developed in others. And remember, because these are stages, you can attain them in a permanent fashion. Before this happens, any of these capabilities will be merely passing states. You will plug into some of them, if at all, in a temporary fashion. Great peak experiences of expanding knowledge and being wondrous. Aha! Experiences profoundly alter. You see glimpses into your higher possibilities, but they come and go. But with practice, you can convert the states into stages or permanent traits in the territory of you. This means that we can become aware of our strengths or intelligences in which we shine, as well as our weaknesses, where we do poorly. And this brings us to another of our 5 essential elements, our multiple intelligence, or developmental lines. So far, we've looked at stages, and we're looking at lines. Each intelligence grows or can grow through 3 major states, or through any stages or developmental models. There can be 3, 5, 7, just depends on how you want to divide it up. We go back to centigrade and Fahrenheit. It just depends on how you want to slice the pie. What makes sense to you in looking at various stages. In emotional intelligence, stage 1 means that you've developed the capacity for emotions centering on me. Your emotional drives for hunger, survival, and self-protection. Stage 2 so you're going from egocentric in stage 1 to ethnocentric in stage 2. You'll expand from me to us, begin to develop emotional commitments and attachments. And then you go into, as you develop, you will go into stage 3. You'll develop a further capacity for care and compassion that reaches beyond your own tribe and includes all humans and sentient beings. Okay, so there is a psychograph, and this is a I don't remember who says develop the psychograph, but a psychograph helps spot where your greatest potentials are. You may already know pretty much where you excel, but it will show you your own contours so that you can more confidently deal with both your strengths and weaknesses. It also spots the way that all of us are unevenly developed, and thus helps prevent us from thinking just because we're terrific in one area doesn't mean we're going to be terrific in all areas. It helps us to understand ourselves and others. There's been more than one spiritual teacher or politician that has crashed through not understanding the developmental levels. Okay, on the back of that page, there is the cognitive lines for development, moral lines for development, emotional or affective lines, interpersonal lines, needs lines, self-identity lines, the aesthetic line, the pseudosexual line, spiritual line, and value line. And this is just for your information so you can look at where you are. It gives you something to introspect on. To be intricately developed does not mean that you have to excel in all known intelligences, or that all of your lines will be at a level 3. But it does mean that you develop a good sense of what your psychograph is actually like, so that with a much more integral self-image, you can plan your future development. For some people, this will indeed mean strengthening certain intelligences that are weak and are causing problems. For others, it will mean clearing up serious problems, such as emotional. And for others, it's simply recognizing where their strengths and weaknesses lie and planning accordingly. Using an integral map can scope out our own psychograph with more assurance. Thus, to be intricately informed does not mean that you have to master all the lines. Another important point with the psychograph and spiritual training is you're introduced to a full spectrum of states, consciousness, and body experiences right from the start. Sometimes peak experiences, meditative experiences, shamanic states, altered states, means that you can wake up to the fact that there is a different perspective, but it's not, you cannot be introduced to all of the qualities of higher stages without actual growth and practice. You can have a peak experience, but you can't have a peak experience of a higher stage because states unfold sequentially. So when you have that aha moment, and you can't think, a couple of weeks later, you have another aha moment. I thought I had that aha moment. Well, that's because you were in a state. With practice, that can become a stage where you have reached that level. And then it's something that you have, just like if you study language, you have that language where you can study and reach a level or a state where you have access to it all the time.
That integration.
Yes.
In Hermetic teachings, they say the lips of wisdom. Oh.
And it's probably not turned on.
I was just going to share an overlapping similar quote, different language. The lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. Same thing. You can't understand until you understand. You can hear it. You might not be able to hold it.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm done.
So with repeated practice, you own the stages of development. You transfer, and with more practice, it becomes faster and easier. Higher states training can actually act as a lubricant on the spiral of development, helping you to disidentify with a lower stage so that the next higher stage can emerge until you can stably remain at higher levels of awareness on an ongoing basis, whereas a passing state has become a permanent trait. These higher states training, such as meditation, are part of an integral approach. In short, you can't skip actual stages, but you can accelerate your growth through them by using various types of integral transformative practices. And this is what we part of the integral approach. So the next stage of development that I'm going to present is types. There are many types. Each of the previous components that we've talked about has a masculine and a feminine. There are two basic ideas here. One is the idea of types themselves. The other is with masculine and feminine as an example of types. So every stage has both masculine and feminine. Every type, the types you have, every line has masculine and feminine qualities. And you can be any of the types at any stage of development. And it's very useful to understand types when you're combining lines, levels, and states. And levels is just an interchangeable word with states. States and levels are used interchangeably. Carol Gilliam has this is an example of different types. She says there are different voices. So she goes through 4 major stages of moral development: the pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional, and integral. Pre-conventional is morally centered in me, and it's egocentric. Conventional, you're morally centered in us, and that's ethnocentric. Post-conventional, you're morally centered in all of us, and that's world-centric. And then integral, you're morally centered. You begin to befriend both the masculine and feminine, and you begin to transcend that into the oneness. She talks about the voice of the male and the female separately. The male is more toward autonomy, justice and rights, whereas a woman's voice is more about relationship, care, and responsibility. Men tend toward agency, women toward communion. Men look, women touch. Men tend toward individualism, women tend toward relationship. So an example from children is a boy says, "Let's play pirates." And the girl says, "Let's play We Live Next Door." And the boy says, "No, I want to play pirates." The little girl says, "Okay, we'll play that you're the pirate that lives next door." Men are more likely to say a rule is a rule. Women would say, "Let's give it another try." Boys will hurt feelings to save a rule. Girls will break rules to save feelings. So the stages that she notices are selfish, care, universal, and integrated. And she has some teaching on healthy and unhealthy male and female, which I don't think we need to go into today. So the stages are that we have the stages of development are another way of looking at them is we're awake, we have a gross body. We have a dream state, which is your subtle body. It's the energy, emotional feeling, fluid, flowing images. And that's where I have a dream would come from. You're free to share different possibilities. So you're free to dream and in that dream state. Stage 3 is a blank, nothingness, formless, emptiness, or he calls it a ground of being. It's infinite and causal. In the chakra system, which they break it up into 7 levels, your first 3 levels are food, sex, and power. Neither is higher or better. Each level has a masculine or feminine type or voice in each of those. And that's kind of what I shared before. The 4th and 5th stage of the chakra is your rational heart and your communication. Your rational heart is 2 equivalent types of each level of consciousness. So there you have both sets of consciousness at that level. And then your 6th and 7th level is your psychic and your spiritual, where everything begins to merge and you're using aspects of both the masculine and the feminine. At the 7th level, they meet and unite. So when you're looking at this, you can check yourself and others, organizations, culture, to be sure that you include both the masculine and feminine to be as comprehensive and inclusive as possible. Types are as important as quadrants, lines, levels, stages. So to be intricately developed does not mean that you have to excel in all the known intelligences or that you have all of your lines at level 3. But it does mean that you develop a very good sense of what your own psychograph is actually like, so that with a much more integral self-image, you can plan your future development. For some people, this will indeed be strengthening certain intelligences that are so weak they're causing problems. For others, it will mean clearing up a serious problem or pathology in one line. For others, it's simply recognizing where their strengths and weaknesses lie and planning accordingly. Using an integral map can scope out our own level of consciousness. Generally, in the integral model, we work with about 8 or 10 stages of development. Basically, they found that using more than that just gets too vague. Okay, so now we come to the last stage, which is the 4 quadrants. And I have a handout for that one. And it's 2-sided. So the 4 quadrants is the map. It's how we can map out. It gives us 4 dimensions of phenomena that are not reducible to each other. It gives us 4 lenses through which to view aspects of any situation. So we have the upper left is I. It's yourself. It's who you are. It includes your intentional, your experimental, your interpersonal, and your subjective. Below that, in the lower left quadrant, is the we. It's where you come from. It's your culture. It's the rules that you were passed down to you when you were learning and growing. It's could be your training in religion. It could be your training in philosophy. It could be your training in education. So it's why you have become who you are, but it's the inside of you. It's everything that you can't measure. On the right-hand quadrant is everything you can measure. So on the upper right-hand quadrant, it's your physicalness. It's the things that when you go to the doctor, they measure. They can measure what's going on the inside of you, and then they make a diagnosis. So it's all the things that can be measured in the physical realm. On the lower right-hand side, it's the societal outcroppings of all the others. On the outward side, it doesn't include the inside of yourself. So it's the systems, it's inner objective, and it's social. So when you look at yourself, you look at who you think you are, and if you reflect on where you came from. When I look at this, I relate to Wilbur because I was raised a Christian Scientist. Both of my grandmothers were Christian Scientists. And so I was taught that everything that happens to us happens on an inside, it's an inside job. So the reason that it comes out into the outside is because something is haywire, they call it error thinking, on the inside. So when I look at illness, I look at what caused it. One of the ways that integral philosophy divides this up is, and I'll give you an example from medicine. On the upper right-hand quadrant, if you're depressed, doctors are going to look at you and they're going to say, I think it's neurotransmitters are not functioning right. You're not getting dopamine and serotonin and that kind of stuff. So they'll give you a drug that will up that because that's what they focus on. They focus on what can be measured. But if you focus on the upper left quadrant, you're looking at what's going on inside that makes you depressed. And it could be that you lack purpose, that you are not feeling connection. And so if you're treating someone from the inside, you're going to look at how you can get them to have purpose. And I think back from the movie The Secret, where the guy is depressed and he's being counseled to go do something for somebody. And he goes, oh yeah, there was all those leaves outside this lady's door. And he goes down and he cleans it all up without talking to her. And he comes back and he's not depressed anymore because he's had purpose. He's had something that he did. And so that changed that got him out of the depression. When you look at the lower part of the quadrant, on the lower left side, culturally, maybe that depression is accelerated because it's a shame to talk about how you feel. It's a shame to be depressed. So you can't talk to anybody, so you stay in that depression because your society has said, we can't talk about those things. So in order to permanently change somebody, you have to look at what they're thinking, what their background is, how they came up, how they derived at where they are. And then on the lower right-hand side, you look at the social structure of how can they get to a group? Do they have access to a group where they can talk about their depression? Do they have access to the medication, the systems? And so when you look at life through an integral approach, you look at all four quadrants, because that's what's really going to affect a permanent growth into a stage of development and not just a state. Modern medicine very often just treats the state. They don't treat the stage. They don't look at the whole person. And with the integral approach, Wilbur looks at the whole approach in every organization, everything that you can look at. Whole Foods is one of his examples in the quest that I took, where they look at the individual. Is the individual in my organization given the advantages and the ability and the incentive to grow? And they develop people. They grow people to advance in the company. When you get to the third or fourth level of development, you get into management. Upper management, you have to be at level 5 or 6, because at that level, you have the growth in the intelligence to be able to stay at that level with everything that you're going to have to deal with. They look at the culture within the country, within the company. Are people getting along? Are they learning how to interact? They look at systems. They look at what the world needs, which would actually be the lower right. What helps the environment? What's good for the environment? And so in their products, I had a guy tell me, because I asked him, he was working at Price Cutter, and I said, the black plastic is not recyclable in Springfield. And he said, yeah. He said, I worked at Whole Foods, and they used the brown trays. And he said, the problem is that they deteriorate. So if you've got meat that you're putting on the shelf and it's going to be there for 3 days, that plastic will only last for a day because it's made to biodegrade. So he says, you have to change out every piece of meat that doesn't sell every day for 3 or 4 days. He says, you just have so much waste. It's not feasible. But Whole Foods does that because they care more about the environment. Most companies don't even take that into consideration. So there are systems for business that are based on first quadrant. There are systems that are based on the upper right-hand quadrant, that are based on just the physical system. There are systems that are based on the culture within the system, and there are business systems that are based on just the how do we make more money? And he said, surprisingly, the business systems that take into account all 4 quadrants, that give to their communities, and that care about their people, and are growing their people, giving their people opportunities to grow, you would think they're giving so much away. You would think, their financial would not be as great, their profit. But he said profit loss in some of the Fortune 500 companies might be 600 or 700%. He says theirs is like 1,000% or 1,500%, because they're looking at the whole system. And the more we look at the whole system, the more it greases the axles of the universe to be able to flow into you and to grow you up. And so it when I went through this quest with Wilbur on Mind Valley, and I began to look at the 4 quadrants, and the back of this has a little bit more information that can help you look at what's in those quadrants. This is for your own personal. I knew that getting through this material today, and I'm amazed that I've gotten through as much of it as I did, because I've actually gotten to where I wanted to be. It gives you a base. And when you recognize that there are states and stages and types and lines and quadrants, when you look at a person, where are they? Are they stuck in a level because some traumatic thing happened when they were a child and they never got past the ethnocentric level? That's where most of your gang people are, because they're still in that tribal mentality. It gives you an understanding of where they are and some compassion for where they are, so that we can open up and maybe we can see how to relate to that person that will inspire them to want to advance to the next stage. This whole system is just, I'm jazzed, because it explains so much that just being exposed to it and being aware that this is a map for humanity. You can take anything and plug it into that 4 quadrants and look at where it is. And I think, looking at this church, we can plug it into the 4 quadrants and see where we need to grow, where we need to develop. We can take a business, we can take anything and plug it into this 4 quadrants, and it gives us a map of where we are, and it gives us some insight into where we can go. So that's my class, and I'm not seeing any announcements.
Right there.
Ah, oh, yeah.
The guy that he built Caterpillar tractors, he went broke 5 or 6 times, and then he decided that he would give 90% to the Lord and keep 10% to himself, and his company, when he built it out of bankruptcy, and Caterpillar Tractor is one of the biggest companies in the world now.
Okay.
So he found out giving back to his community was more important than anything else.
Yeah. And that actually would go into the lower right quadrant, which would in turn change all of the quadrants. Okay. So there are many different ways that we can support Unity. There are online ways, and we've already passed the basket. So thank you for your contributions. Announcements. Meditation tonight at 6 o'clock is open to everyone. It is amazing. Every Monday evening we host an African drumming class. These lessons by Neil Lendo, who has had over 20 years of experience in West Africa. I've been going. They're fun classes. On Tuesday, March 11th, we'll join author and poet Karen Crago for her 2nd session of Earth Writing Workshop. devoted to writing love notes to our Mother Earth. Earth Writing aims to offer both instruction and inspiration for poems and essays about nature and the environment. Some of the work created in Earth Writing will be placed on display at Planet Unity. Sessions are from 6:30 to 8. They're open to the public, and they're free to attend. And I'd like to see a better crowd here this week than there was last week, but you don't have to start with the first one. You can come in anytime. Navigating Grief Support Group meets the second and fourth Friday of each month. Their next meeting is Friday, March 14th at 6 o'clock. The group is open to anyone experiencing any type of grief. It's time to do some spring cleaning and donate all your unwanted items to Planet Unity yard sale. You can drop the donations off anytime during regular church hours, Monday through Friday, 10 to 4, and on Sunday mornings, and that starts today. We're collecting items for Planet Unity silent auction. This auction's a big hit and a big moneymaker at Planet Unity. Items can be crafts, something unique, a gift card or service. If you have questions, please contact Carolyn Clark. If you've been attending regularly for 6 months and have thought of becoming a member, you can pick up an application on the table in the foyer. New members ceremony will be held on April 6th during the service. There's a new member orientation on March 30th, right after the service. Our bylaws require new members to attend the orientation. We're currently accepting applications for a junior Sunday school coordinator. If you're interested, please stop by the office to get a copy of job description. Submit a letter to Dean stating your experience. It says past experience, and somebody said all experience is past. That would make a good contribution for the position. Interest is due by March 10th before 4 o'clock. Okay, so please join me in the circle at the back of the meeting for prayer. And thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Elbee.